Hi, everybody. This is Lee. Welcome to McQueen Press. I just wanted to say, hey, it's been a long time. I shouldn't have left you without a dope beat to step to or a video to watch. Where have I been? I've been right here, trying to repair my equipment. Had some kind of equipment failure. I've been getting out the tinfoil, the bobby pins, the safety pins, the duct tape, trying to make repairs. And I've got it somewhat up and running. I've been jiggering around with it, and I stuck things in and stuck things on and turned it on, and here I am. So, I left off talking about the Republican Party. Why am I doing that? It's because the Republican Party is ruling about 5 different branches of government right about now. The judicial, the legislative, the executive, the governorships, and the state legislatures. What else is there to talk about? So, they've acquired a lot of power. They've acquired a lot of access, and they've acquired the responsibility to govern, and they have been dropping the ball. And so I'm going to talk about them because of that. I want to be governed with a high quality governing ship. And it's not up to par right now. So they got to get it together or something. Anyway, I have been talking about the fact that the Republican Party, it has drifted or driven itself, or were driven or pushed or pulled out of the stratosphere to they're like out in orbit right about now. That the decisions that they're making, the policies that they're creating, are just so out of tune, out of step, across the line, out of touch. Just pretty much disregarding common decency and common sense. And so, hey, let's look back in history so we can use a measuring stick to see how did we ever get here. Really, how did we get here? And I've been using everyone from Bernie Sanders as a guide who's made his own assessments. I've been using Ralph Nader as a guide who's also made assessments. And Ralph Nader has written several books on the topic of how corporations have actually taken over our government. What the founding fathers had wanted to prevent, what Dwight Eisenhower had warned us about, is happening, has happened, is on the verge of happening. I mean, I'm not even sure where we are. All I know is it's looking really weird. It's looking kind of strange. And so, again, I go back in history to see, like, okay, this is how it was then, this is how it is now. And even supporters of the Republican Party, the citizens, the voters, the people that consider themselves right, maybe even centrist to right, that maybe they describe themselves as Republicans, libertarian, or conservative. And so I wanted to look at that word conservative because I already explored the concept of how the Republican Party is not where it was with Abraham Lincoln, one of the early or the first Republican president, and that it's not the party of Dwight Eisenhower, which Bernie Sanders pointed out. And then Ralph Nader has even pointed out that they've even gone far beyond where it was under Richard Nixon. And so that Richard Nixon, actually, under his administration, there were many progressive steps that were made. The de-escalation and then end of the Vietnam War, calling the troops home. The end to the draft, the military draft. And then a scale back and a drawdown, and then he started the war, a domestic war on drugs, but and so moving on. And then also the fact that the Roe v. Wade decision on abortion occurred under the Nixon administration, also the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency, and so several advances under the Nixon administration. And then some of the reversals happened under Ronald Reagan, his administration, that there was a leaning towards a preference for corporatism over actual peopleism, or populism, I guess it's called. And so that seemed to occur under Ronald Reagan, that even with the war on drugs, the prison industrial complex had not expanded to the point that it had beyond Ronald Reagan, and then under Bill Clinton's administration, who was a globalist and a corporatist, and who decided to acquire his own power base along with his wife Hillary Clinton by serving the corporate sphere rather than the people. And so that began the right, and I say right delicately, but it's really not right. It's more of the drive towards corporatism, globalism, and then attacks on certain protections that have been put into place, like Glass-Steagall, things like that, many things. And so it was a long process to get here, but we were warned several times. And I just wanted to, again, just put out there like a reality check of the idea of conservatism, that many people have adopted that term and described themselves thus. And the fact that this term originated underneath Theodore Roosevelt, his administration. He was a Republican president. He was vice president to William McKinley, and then he became president, and then he was also governor of New York. And so very much involved in the politics of the day during the turn of the 20th century. So from 1901 to 1909, Theodore Roosevelt was the Republican president. And that he described himself, or he was described as conservative, with the original meaning of the term, that he wanted to conserve natural resources. That was his main focus. He was very much well known for that. Conserving public lands, monuments, wildlife, that arena. He liked to hunt. He was a hunter, and so of course he wanted to preserve his hunting grounds. He spent a lot of time in North Dakota, and then he enjoyed his time out west, and he wanted to preserve that. And so he was very much wanting to conserve natural resources. He was into conservation. He was a conservative. He was a conservator of natural resources. And so that's the original meaning of the term. It's been taken all around the mulberry bush until it means things from, well, I'm a conservative, therefore I want to sell off our natural resources, our drinking water, and our public lands and our public spaces to corporations because I'm a conservative. And people clap their hands like, you go, boy, you're a conservative. And it's just not making sense. And so, again, it's when you look at the really original meaning of the word conservative and the way that people throw it around and just really misuse what they think it means, that some people will say, well, I'm a conservative. That means I feel that these minorities need to start stepping up to the plate and taking care of themselves. And I'm like, well, that's actually not conservative. That might be bigotry, but it's not conservative. In fact, that you are, with your bigotry, giving conservatives, true conservatives, a very bad name. And so, if you are a true conservative in the Teddy Roosevelt meaning of the word, that you want to preserve natural resources for public use, public lands, public monuments, national parks. These are originated with Teddy Roosevelt. He was a champion of them and was very much a protector of these spaces. If you're a conservative in the original meaning of the word, I suggest that you push back against the people who are mistaking conservatism for bigotry. You know, protect your own, space, your own public space. And then also, some people mistake conservatism with, well, that, I just feel like the free market, blah, 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 blah. Well, Theodore Roosevelt was a trust buster, that he was very vigilant about busting up attempts at monopolies by corporations. He was a watchdog. He supported competition. He was definitely not a servant to the corporations. And so again, with the service to the fossil fuel industry, trying to acquire private lands from ordinary citizens and to give those to the fossil fuel industry at market price, to take from the poor and give to the rich, to take from the public and give to the private. That's not what Teddy Roosevelt was about, and that's not what conservatism is about. And that people over the years have changed the meaning from what it used to be. And that likely occurred, somewhere, well, I'm not sure, but it did occur. Perhaps around the Ronald Reagan administration, where meanings just changed, and then continued under the Bill Clinton administration, where meanings just really, really changed. And so the funny thing is that Theodore Roosevelt was considered also a progressive, that he was so concerned after the end of his term in 1909 of the direction of the idea of conservatism under William Taft, the following president. He was so concerned that he decided that he wanted to run for office again, that he wanted to throw his hat into the ring. He ran as third party, the Bull Moose Progressive Party. So he was conservative, but he was a progressive conservative, if you can imagine. And so I'll post links to Theodore Roosevelt's information, so people can see how that term originated and how it's just gone off track, like many things have. And then also the fact that I didn't list him out like with Abraham Lincoln and Dwight Eisenhower or Richard Nixon or even Ronald Reagan. The thing is that Theodore Roosevelt, while he was a progressive and then a conservative on issues, he was also a military interventionist, that he was an imperialist, that he was a warmonger. And so, you take people like they are. He was a bigger than life personality. There are many things about him politically that appealed to many people. And that there are also concerns about the concept of imperialism and colonialism, and the fact that there was a drive and possibly a false flag when he was in charge of the Navy, Teddy Roosevelt, that there was maybe encouragement to get into a war with Spain, when McKinley, who was the president then, wanted to try diplomatic means or negotiate. So, it's different things. And so here we are today, but I just wanted to make sure that people understand, like, there's original meanings and then there's meanings that have been turned upside down 180 degrees to people think that conservatism means that, well, that means we serve the corporations. That's what conservative means. This means that we harass women and their healthcare choices. That's what conservative means. This means that we harass ethnic minorities. This is what conservative means, and it doesn't. It doesn't mean any of those things. The way that people are interpreting it, they're changing the meaning and promoting themselves as conservatives. They're actually smearing true conservatives. And so the time to push back is now. And I've talked about the brand new Congress before, and how that there are a new breed of Republicans. Perhaps they're an older breed, an original breed of Republicans who are trying to bring the Republican Party back to a more sensible setting, not necessarily back to our early 20th century setting. Of course, we have to keep going forward, progressive conservatism, um, but maybe a type of conservatism that actually serves the people, that's more populist, without the aspect of racial hatred or harassment or threats or intimidation, and that these are not conservative. These are bigotry, and that there is a difference. So if someone tells you they're a conservative, ask them about their political philosophy on several issues: foreign policy, military defense, minimum wage, worker rights, labor rights, environment, natural resources, infrastructure, things like that. And you'll find out soon what type of conservative they really are. Are they truly a conservative, or are they something else, someone trying to disguise their bigotry by calling it conservatism when it isn't? And so, again, we'll see what the brand new Congress accomplishes in 2018. On the other side of the aisle, we had some recent elections at the congressional level, and people have been pointing out the fact that the progressive Democrat, or the Bernie-crat Democrat, did not win those elections. But what I've noticed, even with Rob Quist, the fact that he came within 7 points of winning his election, it tells me that he was successful in having the win of his Republican challenger, the person who actually won, Gianforte. That prior to this election in Montana, Ryan Zink held that seat for 2 election cycles, winning as a Republican by 15 points. And that during this year's election cycle, Gianforte was only able to win by 7 percentage points. And so that means that there's a change coming from the electorate, that there is a longing and a desire for true conservatism from the population, maybe more populist leaning, but without the other aspects that we've seen, the Trumpism kind of contaminating that type of Republican philosophy. And so what I would recommend for candidates such as this, I talked about the brand new Congress. I would make a suggestion that those Bernie-crats who were able to narrow the leads in supposedly safe Republican districts, sign up with the Justice Democrats and try it again in 2018, next fall. Rev up your campaign, learn from this year's campaign, keep your contact list, your fundraising list and all that, your communications, and sign up with a machine, a progressive machine on the Democrat side of the aisle, if that's how you want to run, because some people do not want to run as independents or third party. They want to run major party, but not as a corporate type of candidate, either on the Republican side or the Democrat side. And so those who want to run as Republicans, as progressive Republicans, I would suggest signing up with the brand new Congress. If you want to run as a progressive Democrat, and as opposed to, libertarian or green or socialist or anywhere outside the major party, or even as an independent or a write-in, I would suggest that you run for Justice Democrats and then challenge again in 2018. So either on the right or the left, we can shift the Overton window and make both political parties serve the people rather than corporations. Good luck.